Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 15 of our reading of Guinevere by Sharan Newman. As always, we'll go over the copyright information. This book is copyright 1981 by Sharan Newman. Right here. And I have written permission to read this book on my YouTube channel. Anyways, in the last episode, or whatever, Guinevere went to visit her unicorn, but it was sad and depressed because it had lived too long. No unicorn was supposed to live that long. Anyways, also, two Saxon prisoners, they were the son and daughter of a Saxon warlord, are now living at the seaside tower where Guinevere lives, and Guinevere is basically living in the same room as with the girl. Anyways, Arthur sent the prisoners there to form some kind of treaty. But anyways, we are going to pick up where we left off, and Gerolus was kind of disappointed that they couldn't get along. The two of them couldn't. But eventually they do, according to this. Okay. This paragraph right here is basically about how they had different backgrounds, kind of similar but different. How they were both only children, well, only daughters, and stuff like that. Anyways. So they could understand each other and enjoy being together, but there was a last chasm that could not be bridged. To Guinevere, Alswitha was a friend. She was loving and gentle. Her Latin had improved to the point that she hardly even made a mistake in grammar. Her manners were refined and better than those of many of the people who sat down at dinner each night at the castle, but she was still a Saxon. She was the invader, the heathen. She was the symbolic villain of every horror story Guinevere had ever heard. Now and again, Guinevere would forget, but a phrase, a gesture would bring it back to her, and she would pull away. Alswitha's pride felt this deeply, and for this reason, she too kept Guinevere from coming too close. The others in the castle hardly bothered to find out about her. They assumed she didn't understand a word they said and made no attempt to teach her. The horror stories were good enough for them. When it was made clear that she was under Guinevere's protection, as well as Sidra's, she was not treated as badly as she might have been. Men like Moron and Cheldric considered Saxon women to be spoils of war and leered at her openly, making low-voiced comments that would have been clear to hear from the tone, even if she had not understood the muffled words. Alswitha knew that only a slender thread of respect and discipline kept them from paying more overt attention to her in public. In the dining hall or courtyard, she was proud and aloof, but when she found it necessary to go alone from one part of the castle to another, through the long dark corridors or into rooms filled with shadowy, cold alcoves, she frankly ran, looking from side to side constantly like an animal pursued by a predator. The women of the castle found her a ready subject of gossip, which they greeted eagerly, there not being much else to do in the winter. They sniffed at the cut of her clothes, which showed her ankles, her barbaric and ostentatious amount of jewelry, her disdainful way of looking at them, for all the world as if she thinks we are the captives and she is the mistress, someone would say. No doubt she is used to being somebody's mistress, another would slur softly over her embroidery. We have heard about Saxon women and their free ways. It makes me ill to be under the same roof with her, a fosterling from a northern estate muttered. And her brother, have you seen the way he looks at us? I saw him ogling me openly the other day, and I felt as if he could see completely through my clothes. I was so upset, I couldn't eat the whole day. She shivered in horrified delight. Someone should tell Sidra that he should be kept away from us. Another fosterling. suggested, but apparently no one wanted to be the someone to tell her. So the conversation circled on to other complaints and worries, and back again to the Saxons and in their midst. Alswitha and Guinevere's shadow, except for an hour or two every day, when she sat with Igfrith, she worried about him. He made no effort to learn about the Britons. He hardly ever moved from the corner in which Sidra had put him. The complaints, taunts, and insults rolled around and over him. They sounded to him like the growling of bears or the grunts of wild boars. He paid no attention. He had no desire to learn their language. It would please him greatly when they were forced to learn it. He knew the day would come. Look at them, he gloated, prideful, stupid, clinging to their heritage as if stale history and the ashes of their ancestors could make them any greater than they were. Ecgfrith was sure that once they were gotten from their horses, these Britons who called themselves Romans would be too weak and clumsy to withstand the superior numbers and organization of his people. Everything he saw at the castle confirmed his opinion. Why, the clod who slept next to him could hardly stagger into his bed each night. He cautioned Alswitha against letting anyone know how good her Latin had become. Guinevere and Geraldus didn't matter. He wanted her to listen to everything and repeat to him all the rumors, all the gossip, all the information he could get. But why, Alswitha would ask, even if we do not know how strong their army is and where they are going? We are still prisoners here. There is no way for us to warn our father. Even if we could, he has sworn a blood oath on our lives that he would remain in the territory granted him through the treaty with Vortigern. Ecgfrith frowned at her. Don't be absurd, little sister. Do you think an oath is binding when made to this? They were fools. Do you know that Ael swore not by our gods, but by that of these Christians, as if that were more threatening and of greater strength? Our father has planned to rule this entire island one day, and we will share it with him. He will not be stopped or intimidated by oaths and hostages. I will not be so bound either. I have sworn a much more sacred oath to escape from this place at the first chance. Alswitha was frightened by his talk. She was well aware of how shamed he had been to be turned over meekly to the enemy, to be unable to fight when all his life he had been trained for nothing else. She was afraid that he spoke the truth about his father, and she knew then how little he valued her life. Ecgfrith, she begged, you mustn't think of trying to escape. How would you get away from here? This castle is stone upon stone, with only a narrow passage back to the land. There are a dozen men who guard the gates, and even more watch the ocean from the towers. How could you avoid being spotted and killed? Perhaps there is a way. Your haughty friend Guinevere manages to go and return with no one the wiser. If I could find the path she takes to the shore, I could leave that way. It would be tricky for the first few minutes, but those guards are watching for ships far out at sea. They would not notice a man swimming right under their noses. If I swam only a few miles up the coast, I could make my way back to our encampment. Our father is not far from here. All I need is the chance to get to him. He has not returned to our hall, but then he has not returned to our hall, but then he has already broken trust. How could he do that? Alswitha, hadn't I explained it to you? There is nothing to break. I have thought of a way in which this Arthur can be defeated. Don't you want to be revenged for our defeat at Mons Badon last summer? I know where they are weak. I must return and report this. You would leave me here alone? Her voice trembled. Not for long. I promise to return for you. You wouldn't be harmed. You are practically one of them already. You speak their language. You have friends. I would take you with me, but you are not a strong enough swimmer. You would never survive the icy water. Please, my sister. Me, Leofre? Alswitha, believe me, this is our only hope. You must help me. Follow Guinevere, find out the path that she takes to the shore. That is all. That is all. I would dive from the cliffs, but the rocks are all around. I must find a safe place to enter the water. Then soon, when the storms are not so fierce, I will go, and sooner than that, you will be returned to us. Alswitha finally agreed, but she was troubled. In her own way, she was as naive as Guinevere. She believed that in the sanctity of an oath. She could not see that it mattered what one swore by. All the old tales were full of solemn oaths. Everyone knew that an oath breaker was an outcast from all decent people. Ecgfrith said that it was invalid in this case because the oath was made by a god that was not theirs. She wanted to believe him, but it bothered her greatly. She wondered if the other thing he had said was true, that she was almost one of them. She didn't feel that she had changed, but if her father had done this terrible thing, did she want to remain with her people? Her head began to ache as she climbed the steps to her room. She noticed through one of the chinks in the wall that Guinevere was returning. She was hurrying across the courtyard, wrapped against the mist in a long woolen coat, although her face was hidden. An escaping gold braid proclaimed her identity. Right here. An escaping gold braid proclaimed her identity. Where has she been on a day like this? Alswitha wondered. She hated to be out in the wet. She hates to be out in the wet. She shook her head. Guinevere has clearly been somewhere beyond the walls of the castle. The bottom of her robe was damp. This must be what Ecgfrith meant. But there was nothing there but the ocean beating upon the rocks. Why would Guinevere go down there? Perhaps she just needs to be alone anywhere, Alswitha thought. She has often said that she hates having all these people about her. For some reason, Alswitha was reminded of Coral. She smiled and then sighed. She wished he were there to help her make a decision. He always managed to make her problems clearer and her decisions easier. And he had been so kind to her, even though he was so miserable, especially during those horrible months after her mother had left and the burden of being the hostess in the hall had fallen to her. He had kept her from despair when all the men were gone and the business of running the household was too much for her. He had hated the crush of people too, and told stories of times when he had traveled alone just for the joy of solitude. It was strange that of all the people in her father's entourage, he was the one she missed the most. She blushed as the memory came to her of a comment she had overheard. Two old serving women, distant aunts of hers, had been cackling over their soup by the fire. They hadn't noticed how near she was and didn't bother to lower their voices. I don't like the way she looks at him, one brayed to the other. There'll be trouble for that, letting a slave in the hall at night, the other agreed. Yael will flay him alive and beat her well. But now I remember my own youth. There was this smith. There may be nothing to it anyway. Alswitha always did have a weakness for wounded things. That had been over a year ago, and Alswitha still cringed at the unbidden remembrance. She had tried to be more careful after that, but those careless words had made her realize how much she did care for this wounded creature that had been brought into her house. Now that she had known what Ecgfrith was planning, she longed for him even more. I hope I may live to see him again, she whispered. Guinevere came in then, radiant and breathless. Her own exultation was such a contrast to Alswitha's mood that she asked what was wrong. Has anyone been annoying you? I will see that they stop it at once. No, Lady Sidra has seen to it that no one even speaks rudely to me. Alswitha hedged. She didn't want to tell Guinevere that she had been homesick for a slave. You are very kind. I was only remembering my home. I miss my mother. Guinevere sat down next to her and put her arm around her. I know it. Here. I know I miss my family too. Soon I am sure you will be released and you will see her again. No, I won't. She's gone. I'll never see her again. Guinevere was embarrassed by her clumsiness. I'm sorry. I didn't think that she might have died. I didn't mean to. Alswitha looked at her with a puzzled expression. I must not understand your language well enough yet. I did not say that she had died. I said she was gone. She went back to her own homeland across the Ronderad, the road the whales followed. She lives now in her brother's hall. How could she leave you and your brother? Guinevere wished she had held her tongue. It's not that she didn't love us, Alswitha bridled. She wanted to pay the weregeld for me, at least, but there was no money left from her marriage portion, so my father paid her my price, and she left without me. She could not abide here any longer. She hated it. My father is a good man. I am fond of him, but he cares not. He cares only for battle, and would not allow my mother her work. Her work? I don't understand what you are saying. My mother is the finest crafter of gold in our clan. She made this for me, see? And this bracelet. Guinevere had noticed the bracelet before. It was an intricate, lacy piece of jewelry made of dozens of separate coils, all wound together, with spaces in between the joinings. They all seemed to be twining towards one place, and looking closely, she realized that the coils were meant to be the necks of swans. Their beaks and eyes appeared over and over in a line on one side. It was very fine work. Guinevere had never seen anything like it, but still, her mother? Why would your mother want to be a craftsman? It doesn't seem a suitable occupation for a woman of her rank. That is how my father felt. I don't know where he got the idea, perhaps from your people. In the great halls of our homeland, such a person is highly honored, whatever their rank. It is a talent which only a few possess. Her brother was happy to accept her into his home, but here, so after my other brothers were killed in the fighting and my little sister died of the winter fever, she said she would have no more of this place, and she sailed back. I'm glad she went, for she was very unhappy, but I do miss her. Guinevere was silent. She was trying to sort out this strange idea of women of rank who made jewelry and found it more important than her husband or her duties. It bothered her, as if she feared that Gwendolyn might suddenly express a desire for blacksmithing. She turned it round and round in her mind, but since she could find no answer that appealed to her, she dismissed the whole idea and changed the subject. I think Giraldus has been hiding from us lately. We should go find him before he leaves again and make him teach us one of his new songs. He's been wanting you to translate some more of those riddles your people sing. He says that he'll make new melodies for them, and no one will suspect they were Saxon first. It's just the thing for winter entertainment. Even those who can't sing can guess. I think they are very interesting, but I don't understand them all. What's so funny about the one he told last night? Which one? The bellows? Was that what it was? I'm not good at guessing, but now that you tell me, it makes sense. But why were they all laughing? Well, some people thought it might be something else, and I suppose that it amused them to be wrong. Guinevere gave her a penetrating stare. Alswitha blushed. Guinevere sighed and nodded her head. One of those, I thought so. People never want to tell me what they mean. I really think I'm old enough now to have some things explained. Alswitha laughed at her annoyance. I think you are too, but I can't imagine who will have the courage to explain them. Guinevere laughed with her, if a bit ruefully, and they went happily to look for Giraldus, who was not hiding, but was being kept very busy informing Sidra of what was going on everywhere on the island. She was not a person who wanted a quick summary, and every day she had called him to sit with her or follow her around for hours explaining in detail every event, major or minor, that had happened in the last 6 months. He was glad when the girls pulled him away. Thank you, he gasped in gratitude when they were out of Sidra's hearing. That woman would know when every tree blossoms, and every horse foals from Land's End to Hadrian's Wall. And the most amazing thing is that she remembers everything I tell her. They walked up to one of the watchtowers and stood looking out at the sea. It was a gray world, starting with the rocks, almost black. Starting with the rocks, almost black, to the silver and polished waves of the sea, and up into the rising fog and clouds. Guinevere thought it was rather boring, but Alswitha loved it. She never tired of watching the subtle shifts of light and dark. Perhaps in another time she would have been an artist too. Perhaps it was only that the dull colors soothed her by not conflicting with her mood. While Alswitha watched, Guinevere teased Giraldus. "I see you didn't bring the whole troop this time. Have they grown tired of your shouting and criticisms?" "I only wish they had. No, they don't care for the sea air. It gives them chills or something. If you hear them when we get into the mountains, and of course they are always in full force when I'm visiting your parents, they are very fond of hot baths." The dark-haired woman appeared beside him and began aimlessly twisting his long curls about her finger. He brushed his hand across them. He brushed his hand across them to stop her, but not as fiercely as he used to. More with a casual tenderness. Guinevere noticed it. "You have changed in the last few years, Giraldus. You seem happier now somehow." Automatically he glanced over his shoulder, although he knew he would see nothing. Then he smiled. "Yes, I am very content with my life. I know now what lies before me." The woman nuzzled against him and rested her head on his shoulder. He put his arm around her. "I'm going to live with them some day. Not soon, I don't think. I have too much to do here, but I can wait. I have made my choice and am at peace. Here seems so different in his certainty that he seemed so different in his certainty that Guinevere felt wistful that he was slipping away from her. He didn't need her friendship in the way that he had before. It made her very lonely until she remembered her unicorn. After all, she needed no one else as long as she had him. Spring was slow in coming that year, but gradually the days lengthened. Gawain began to move about more actively instead of wandering about half asleep all the time. He and Giraldus could often be heard out in the courtyard, Giraldus harping and Gawain exercising, and both of them singing ribald drinking songs at the top of their lungs. With Gawain out more and not in his bed next to Ecgfrith, the Saxon had more opportunity to get out unnoticed. Alswitha had shown him the path to the beach that Guinevere took, but refused to do anything more. Ecgfrith followed it and found the tiny beach long enough for his needs. Now he only awaited a clear night with little wind. Ecgfrith drew even further into his corner, looking like a pale shadow against the dark wall. While everyone thought he was sleeping, he lay constantly tensing and releasing his muscles, determined to remain strong enough for the swim, and even more to return to defeat these arrogant idiots. Risa spoke no more to Guinevere about Gawain, but one evening Guinevere noticed him smiling sleepily at the maid as he finished a cup of wine before bed, and the next day she saw them strolling across the courtyard hand in hand. Finally the sun broke through, and everyone really began to believe that spring was near. In a few sheltered areas where the ground was not covered by rock, small flowers were sprouting. On a particularly fine day, Guinevere and Alswitha went to the hall for the noon meal. The company was lively and cheerful, for many of the men would soon be leaving to join their units, or at last to apply for admission to one. After a winter of inactivity, they were eager to be off. There was a lot of mock skirmishing, and that got slightly out of hand as the thick, round loaf of bread was tossed from knife point to knife point about the table. The men beside Guinevere, Belenius, grew overexcited and reached out for an impossible catch just as Guinevere put out her hand for a piece of meat. The knife flashed across the table, ripping her sleeve and grazing her hand. She cried out, more surprise than pain. Belenius dropped the knife and went white. "Oh, my lady, forgive me, please. I didn't see you. What can I do? I am so sorry. Here. Oh, wait. Let me help you. Oh, forgive me," he babbled almost hysterically. Guinevere looked around the table and saw horror on everyone's face. She checked her arm. The fabric was torn, and the sleeve dangled so that it would fall into her dish and be in the way. But the scratch on her arm was nothing. It had already stopped bleeding. What were they all so upset about? She smiled reassuringly to Belinus. No, don't worry. It was an accident. I'm not hurt at all. The cloth can be mended. There is nothing to forgive. I simply got in the way of the game. Finish your meal. If our hostess will excuse me, I will change into another gown and return. She gestured to a startled Alswitha. Don't get up. I can manage. She nodded to Sidra, who had not intervened in the matter, and nodded back at her with amused approval. Sidra spoke. Perhaps, Melanius, you could pass me the bread on the platter. Sidra suggested in an ironic tone that made Melanius wish he were surrounded by bloodthirsty Picts instead of the group staring at him now. Guinevere hurried up the stairs. Her slippered feet made no noise on the stone. She lifted the curtain to enter the room and then dropped it with a startled gasp. She retreated a few steps and then sat, unable to go further. She felt weak and her hands were trembling. Had they seen her? She thought not. Gawain's face had been turned away, and Risa, her eyes had been open, but Guinevere didn't think she was seeing the room around her. She tried to control herself, to reason out her feelings. If only they had covered themselves with something, but after all, she had encouraged them. It was what Risa and Gawain had both wanted. Gawain certainly couldn't keep a midnight rendezvous. Then why did she feel so sick? Her mind kept going back to the glistening of their skin, the undulation. She shut her eyes, trying to force it out. It's just, she thought, that it's so intimate, so complete. She couldn't find the words for her feelings. They frightened her. Deep within her mind, she was afraid that the repulsion she felt might also be attraction or even envy. The thought of sharing herself that much with another vague, unknown human being was terrifying, and yet she couldn't forget the rapture on Rice's face. There was someone at the top of the stairs moving around now. She could hear voices, low and caressing. In a panic, lest they catch her, she raced down the steps and right into Geraldus. She looked so upset that he was startled. What is it, Guinevere? What's wrong? Let me go, Geraldus. Hurry. Gawain. She peered back up the dark stairs. Gawain? What did he do to you? Are you hurt? Geraldus was more puzzled than anything else. He knew Gawain well enough to know that he wouldn't make advances on Guinevere. No, of course not. Guinevere made an effort to calm down. I went up to fix my sleeve. She held up her arm, but Risa and Gawain were there. I don't want him to see me. Geraldus nodded. That would be a simple statement for anyone else, but he could tell that she was still shaking. He heard Gawain whistling as he descended. She must have had quite a sight from the exultant tones. We're going to have to stop this here. We have been reading Guinevere by Sharan Newman. And I do have to say this book is still for sale at most places where books are sold, along with the Chessboard Queen, which is the second book in the trilogy, and Guinevere Evermore. And I'm not sure if I'll read the rest of this trilogy on my channel, but I might. Anyways, we have been reading from this book. It's a very, very good book. And so if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe, ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.